Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey YouTube, it's the Pied Piper. I know I'm not supposed to be using that intro anymore, but I cannot think of a good one, so help me come up with something different. Anyway, you guys are probably not going to see this until 2019, but it's actually Christmas Eve. So I wanted to film a video because frankly, I hate Christmas. Most of you know that I come from a very different background, which I'm sure you're aware of if you've watched my videos for any amount of time, if you watched the Getting to Know Me, if you watched any of or heard any of my Lovin's World or It's This World show stuff, then you know a little bit about me. I did not grow up with a traditional family. I was abandoned when I was very young, so I grew up mostly in a ward of the court in Arizona, which is where I am right now. But I think that there are a lot of things that, because of my viewers, which I think are more like in my age bracket, late 20s, 30s, maybe 40s, who knows. But there are things that parents say to their kids. Or if you're a parent, then there's things that you might have said to your kids that either stuck with you from when you were a kid, maybe your parents said it to you, and so you ended up thinking you'd never say it, but then as a parent, you find yourself saying it. I did have parents at some point. So I think that parents kind of say roughly the same stuff. And I know when you're a kid, you're like, I'm never going to say that to my kid. And then you get to be an adult and you have kids and you think, damn it, I know exactly why my parents said that to me. Or you think, oh, when I become a parent, I'm never going to do this. So either one, you have kids. Two, you don't have kids, but you have things that you remember your parents saying to you a lot that annoyed you. Or three, you find yourself saying these things to your kids, or you think that you will eventually probably institute some of these things that your parents used to say to you that you thought were maybe words of wisdom that you wanted to carry on. This is basically, specifically, parents say the darndest things. In the comments, please list some things that you remember your parents saying to you, or that you now use as a parent, or things that you might have travel on when you become a parent. So everybody can follow along with this one. Like I was saying, there is one that parents say all the time, and I can't remember. Of course, I can't remember it now because why would I remember it while I'm filming? But there's one. Oh, the because I told you to. Parents always say because I told you to, and if you're of a certain age, probably your parents said because I told you to. Whenever you asked why, they would say because I told you to. That is like an example of something that parents only say. And I don't know why I decided to do this video. I think it's because I've been watching a lot of Valencia's life, and I've been watching Jamie and Nikki, and I've been watching Game and Babe, who I love all of those channels. Gio and Bart and Tiff and Casey, those are from Just Kidding News. Anyway, all these people have kids, and I just kind of am in that family spirit. Even though I hate the holidays, I'm still in that idea of, family. And I thought, what better way to celebrate family than to roast parents or roast yourself or just remember some things that happened from your childhood. So I'm going to look around because I wrote a list, and I'm going to try to go fast, but God knows that's not always easy for me. One of the things that I know that parents say a lot, which never really got said to me, but it was something that I heard from other people's parents, which was, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And I personally think that that one goes great with YouTube because there are so many keyboard warriors and keyboard thugs. I kind of said those two together, and yeah, that was what the mistake was. Anyway, there are so many of those people that they need to kind of be told, like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. There's all these trolls and all these people who think that they're big and bad when they're behind a keyboard and they are commenting on videos, but you get them in person and they probably never would say that same stuff. So I think that that is number one, something that people should carry on through life. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And that was mostly like a grandma thing. I do remember not my grandma, but a friend's grandma telling me that too. Excuse me, I'm gonna adjust because I feel like my boobs are coming out. Sorry. This is one that I am going to say. This one, not everybody knows, but I grew up, well, no, I didn't grow up forever, but I lived in a group home and they were really big on teaching table manners and things, especially because we were in that formative age of, learning how to do things properly at the table. Anyway, there was a big thing about elbows on the table. And so some of the staff members, and I'm sure this happens in people's homes too. So don't be sad for me or anything that I'm mentioning it, but it happens in people's houses too. I've seen it. And definitely in my house it's happened. But where they will say things about you having your elbows on the table. Now, in one place I lived, if you had your elbows on the table, they would stab you in the elbow with a fork. So you get your elbow off the table. Obviously, that's not the best way to do it. It's a little violent, but it got the point across. But then there was one place I lived where they used to do this little chant if you had your elbows on the table. And so they would say whatever your name was. So like Piper, Piper, strong and able, get your elbows off the table. This is not a horse's stable, but a first class dining table. And everybody would chant it. So then you had to get your elbows off the table. And so every time you had your elbows on the table, that was what they said to you. Then one that I heard as a little kid, even with my own biological parents, was speak when you're spoken to, which I don't think I've ever used that one on my kids, but I know I have heard other people use it when they get so mad and so fed up and they don't know what else to say. They're like, speak when you're spoken to, because kids start speaking out of turn. And nowadays it's real popular not to discipline your kids at all. So yeah, they're speak when you're spoken to. And this one's definitely one from when I was a kid, and in my biological home, was stay out of grown folks' business. Now, if you are, and I'm not saying that people who are not minorities have never heard this one, and there's probably some form of it, but I know that in a lot of minority homes, that was something that was really popular to say, stay out of grown folks' business, stay out of grown folks' business, stay out of adult business, this doesn't concern you, some form of that. Parents used to always say that, and mine definitely said it. I wasn't even allowed to be in the same room when adults were talking, so I could never just like input on their conversations like my kids do me all the time. They'll hear me having a conversation and then repeat the whole thing to other people. But and I have to like remind them, like I just had to get good at not having conversations in my kids' vicinity. But definitely whenever I was younger, that was something that I got told all the time, or I just got sent out of the room. Like I remember there was like this rule that if grown folks start talking, you just need to excuse yourself out the room. Like that was how it was. So the moment two adults started having a conversation, you literally just, extricated yourself from the situation. And then if they needed you, they could just yell your name, but you definitely didn't stay and listen to the conversation. This is one that not my parents didn't say this to me, but my grandma said this to me. And I'm not saying this verbatim, and I'm not sure if this is exactly the wording, but it was very close to this. And I don't know if anybody else has had this too, because there was a rule that you defend yourself. If someone ever picks on you at school, little friend picks on you when you're out playing outside, you had to defend yourself. There was no such thing as coming home beat up. That wasn't an option. Like you either needed, if somebody hit you, you needed to draw blood. If they bit you, you bit them harder. If they punched you, you punched them harder and more times. So that was always the rule. So my grandma would say this thing that if you come home beat up, I'm gonna beat you up. And I don't know, I don't think that's the best way to handle things. I definitely never told my kids that. I always told my kids that it's okay to defend yourself. So if someone hits you, you hit them back harder. And everybody would say, and the teachers did not agree with that, but I was like, whatever, you're not going to stop little Timmy from destroying my child. So I felt like they have to defend themselves. And actually, I had a situation where My oldest daughter did have something like that happen to her where she ended up having to defend herself, and then she got suspended for defending herself even though she did tell a teacher. The teacher didn't do anything and she still kept being assaulted. So finally she defended herself, and those girls did not get suspended, but she did. And I told her vice principal, I was like, well, she's going to have the funnest suspension all time. I didn't pick up not one lick of homework. I didn't do anything. I let her just have at it. She got to sleep in. She got to watch cartoons. I was like, you deserve this because you stood up for yourself. That might not be the right attitude to take, but I feel like she followed the appropriate procedures and she still was assaulted and nobody did anything and they didn't intend to do anything. So I'm glad she handled it. This was one that did happen when I was younger, and I wasn't in my biological home, but I was with my biological family. Um, it wasn't with my biological parents, but it was with my biological family. There we go. Um, this one was, if you don't eat everything on your plate, then you will have the same food for the next meal. So if you eat breakfast and you don't eat everything on your plate at breakfast, then you then have to eat all that same food for lunch. And if you don't eat all of it at lunch, you have it for dinner. And if you don't eat all of it at dinner, it's your breakfast the next day. And then if you didn't complete it ever and it went bad and it had to get thrown away, you would either have what was made for you remade, or you would just be in trouble. You get a whooping. And I don't know if you're not a minority if you know what a whooping is, but a whooping is a whooping, and a lot of people know those, what those are. So spanking, whooping, whatever you want to call it, you would be disciplined harshly if you did not eat what was served to you, and you had to eat it all. One other thing about food, when I was younger, I don't know if this is something that every household does or if anybody else can relate to this, but I was never allowed to have drinks with my food. So from a very little time, well, not really when I was with my biological mother, but when I was with an uncle, um, it was like a very strict rule that if you are eating, you don't have anything to drink. And I think that was based on the idea that kids will drink whatever their drink is fast and then not be as hungry. So they just had this rule that you need to eat your food first and then you can have something to drink. So there would be times where I'm sitting there like dry mouth, can barely swallow, and I could not drink anything. And I would be like dying. Like, you know how when food is, you got a food backlog and you need to drink something to like wash it down? That was never allowable. So I either had to wash it down with spit or eat really slow. Either way, I wasn't gonna get anything to drink until I finished everything I had on my plate. It was horrible because there were so many things that I did not like that disgusted me. I don't know if anybody else has ever been told this, and this was probably um, back from when I was really little, and this was again something my grandma would say more than anybody else, but she would always say this thing, and if anybody can relate or know what it means, please comment and let me know because I never really know for sure. But she would always say things like, don't be all in my mouth. And I would be like, I'm not in your mouth. I would never would say that, of course, because I like breathing. So I didn't say that. But I always thought, how do I get out of your mouth? When did I get in and how do I get out? I don't know what I did, but I don't want to be in there. And she would always be like, get out of my mouth. And I think it meant don't like be listening to their conversation or don't be repeating their conversation or something like that. All I know is she would always say it. And I wouldn't even be paying attention sometimes until I heard that. And then I would be like, well, Nate, I feel like I need to pay attention now because I don't know what I shouldn't have been paying attention to. It was horrible. So if you know what that means, tell me and explain it to me because I never knew. But that was one thing. Well, back in the day, there was this thing of, a child staying in a child's place. Obviously now, as time has gone on, kids are kind of allowed in every place. They have cell phones, they have, laptops, they have tablets, they have everything. And because of my upbringing or because of my childhood, I never really had a childhood. I literally feel like sometimes I was born and then I became an adult, and there was no childhood. And sorry, my phone is making noise. That's inappropriate. I'm filming. Anyway, so like I never was allowed to the luxury of being able to just be a child and be in a child's place. So, but I would hear though, which was weird because I would hear on random occasions and even from people when I lived in group homes and shelters And even when I was with my biological family, for some reason, um, it was always the same. It was basically, a child needs to stay in a child's place, even if they did not necessarily want a child to stay in a designated place. It was weird. So, but one thing that I always told my kids was, or is, I guess, is to just be a child. So if adults ask them questions, like this is my spin on the whole staying in a child's place, because I think that, especially with things that were going on in my home when I was younger, it definitely, especially not with my biological parents so much, but definitely with other places I was placed, there were things that needed to be shared and things that needed to be said. And I think that um, the way of silencing kids sometimes is to tell them to stay in a child's place so then they feel like they can't get help when they need it. So I never wanted to have my kids feel like they couldn't get help if they needed it. And not that I ever thought they would need help against me, but I wanted to make sure that, God forbid, something happened in school or with another adult in their life, I wanted to make sure that they would always feel safe and comfortable to speak about it if it was something bad that was going on. So I would do my spin on staying in a child's place would just be to tell my kids or instruct them that if an adult is asking you questions that you're uncomfortable with, then you tell them, go speak to my mom. And I would always tell them, though, you are allowed to speak about anything going on in your child world to anyone. If you got a new toy you really like, if you have a class you really like, or somebody in school mean, or whatever the case may be, you are allowed to speak on anything childlike in your little world. However, if is your mom dating anyone, or, which sometimes other adults get out of pocket and try to get information from kids. So I never wanted to instruct my kids to lie to anyone. So I would just tell them, if somebody is asking you questions about me specifically, or about things that are not child friendly and they're more adult questions, or you feel like you're not comfortable, then you have every right, and I won't be mad for you to say, I think you should ask my mommy, or please ask my mom, or, just something to that effect. And I would say, and they shouldn't be mad at you if you direct them to me to ask the question to. Then if I choose to tell them or choose to lie or whatever I do, that's on me, but it's not on you. So that was one thing that I like, a spin that I put on it. This is one that, if you ever watch the Cosby Show, and I know everybody has their issues with Bill Cosby, but if you ever watch the Cosby Show, there is one episode where Bill Cosby is sitting there with Theo, and he's playing like a game with Theo, like I think it's Monopoly or something, and they're like going through it because Theo decides he doesn't want to go to school anymore. He doesn't need math. I don't remember what it was because it's been a long time since I've seen that episode. But Bill Cosby says to Theo, I brought you in this world and I'll take you out. Now, I have heard that my whole life, not from anybody. Once my biological parents decided that being parents wasn't in their repertoire and they bounced. Obviously, I grew up in different, shelters, group homes, foster homes. So obviously those people weren't saying it, but I definitely did hear it though when I was younger, the I brought you in this world and I'll take you out sort of mentality. And as much as I thought that I would never say anything like that, I think I did say it once. Because my kid was trying to raise up on me. Like, as you guys know, even though I am very young and still, very much in my 30s, I have a child that is like a full grown adult. And, well, not a full grown adult, but she's up there. Anyway, I think there was a time where she was going through some behavioral issues, and I was trying to figure out a way to take stuff from her. I didn't know the appropriate way, or the proper way. Not appropriate. I was always appropriate, but I didn't know what would work. I was running out of options because nothing was seeming to work to get her behavior under control. And so she had said to me one time, she was smarting off, and she was like, "You can't do anything to me," and blah blah blah. And I was so furious because I was like, oh, this day and age. Even though I don't believe in abusing your kids on any level, but I'm also not against spanking or, grab them by the arm. But I am totally against abusing them. And grabbing somebody by the arm, when I say that, is not in a way that's going to break their arm. It's a way different situation. And if you take this badly or you're triggered, I apologize, but that's not what I mean. But, and plus I'm really small, so and my kids are all bigger than me, so there's no way that I could do that. But, just even a firm hold. And it was funny because she was like, you can't do anything to me. And I was so frustrated because I really couldn't. She was like as tall as me already, and she was only like 9, and we're the same height. It was horrible. So I was like, I was at my wit's end, and I think I was like, I can do whatever I want. I brought you in this world, and I'll take you out. And I had to actually stop myself. When I heard that come out of my mouth, I was like, wow, I can't believe I said that. Like, I didn't say that to her because, I was trying to save face and didn't want to look stupid. But I was like, dang, I just had to commit when I said it to her. But I was like, that was low. So, but I was running out of options. These are bonus ones. These next 4 or 5 are all going to be bonuses. One thing that I thought was hilarious, and I never really thought about it too much until I became an older teenager, later teens, even early 20s. But my mom used to say something, my biological mom used to say something to me that was hilarious. She would always say, because most of my siblings and I, we all have different dads, but she would say that my dad's kids that were not her kids or kids with her were not my siblings. They were the only people from that were my siblings were the people that came from her body and nobody else. And that we weren't half siblings, we were siblings. So we were sisters. As you know, I have a lot of sisters, but we were sisters and that was it. And my brother. But yeah, we had, that was it. That was the rule is that is it. We are not half, we are siblings because we all came out of her body. And any kids that my dad might have, they're not my siblings. Anyway, so yeah, so that was the rule. And I remember thinking at one time, I don't think that's true. But I was so young at the time, I didn't know. But I've heard that from other people too. I've heard that people have that same story. Nobody else has said it to me, but I've heard other people who are adults and around my age said stuff like that too. That they have heard their parents say stuff like that, especially if you're in a home that is divorce or your parents were never married. Then yeah, it's possible you're gonna have siblings from your mom and you're gonna have siblings from your dad. But they would always say, nope, those are not your siblings. Only siblings you have are the ones that came out of my body. And my mom meant that. It was hilarious. And as I got older, I was like, that's not right. I started finally thinking about it and I was like, that doesn't make any sense. But as a little kid, I was like, you're right. And so I never considered any of my siblings my half siblings, even though we are technically half siblings. Okay. Even though they probably consider me not their sibling at all because none of my family seems to like me. Teachable moments. Now, this is something that I learned while I was going through, as I've said, I had a kid when I was really young. And part of trying to prepare myself for the idea that I was going to be a parent, especially when I did not have an example of parents, was that I, intentionally chose to go to some parenting classes. And in those parenting classes, I learned about teachable moments and that, you have to take every opportunity to teach your child. So I would do things my daughter and I, we watched that movie Anastasia, and I thought it was a teachable moment. So we looked up online the real story of Anastasia Romanov and what happened to their family and just all of that. And so I always look for these moments of just ways to teach my kids. And so any moment that I could teach them something or impart some wisdom, I tried to do it. But then it kind of backfired on me because one time my older daughter and I were talking, and this is when she was maybe 3.5, 4 years old. And we're talking and we're in the car and I'm driving and she's asking me about, I mentioned something about kids or babies or something like that. And so she was like, well, how do babies get to be? And I was like, oh, well, a mommy and a daddy, love each other and they make a baby. And she was like, huh. And you can see her little wheels turning because she's always been super intelligent, super intelligent. That kid has never been dumb. Not a day in her life. Well, she's made dumb decisions, but as a whole, she is not a dumb person. So she's been always very quick, very quick. So 3.5, 4 years old, she's like, well, well, mommy, daddy love each other, and then there's a baby. I'm like, yep. And then I was like, she's like, well, how? And I was like, well, the daddy loves the mommy so much, he gives the baby to the mommy, and then she carries the baby in her tummy. And she's like, huh. So then we're sitting there, we're in the car, and we're at a stoplight, and I'm just like, it's about to turn green. And so right as it turns green, she's like, how does the daddy put the baby in the tummy? And I was like, oh, And because I was super young at the time, like barely in my 20s, I don't know what to say. I'm like, I've never been asked this question before. When I was younger, I didn't get a birds and the bees talk. Like like nobody told me about the birds and the bees. There is still stuff I don't know to this day because nobody ever explained the birds and the bees. And so because I always looked at it as a taboo topic, I never asked any questions either because I thought you don't ask questions about that. So if I haven't been able to search for it online, like secretly myself, there's stuff I don't know. So in that way, I'm super juvenile. So I didn't know how to talk to my kid about that kind of stuff. So of course I'm freaking out. Like I'm literally having a full-on panic attack. Like, how do I tell her how the baby gets in there? How does the daddy get it in there? And so then like I literally put that conversation, and I don't advise this, but I put that conversation on pause for like a couple years before we got back to it. And I gave her some BS answer at that time because I was like, that's all I can give you. And she looked at me like, I know you're lying. I know you are lying. You are not telling the truth. I don't believe you, but I'm going to let you escape. And I was happy that she gave me a reprieve because I did not know what to say. So then years later, fast forward like maybe 3 or 4 years later, she asks again. And she knows more. Like she's, mentally she's picking up things here and there. And so she asks again, how does a daddy get the baby into the mommy? And I was like, well, I'm not going to explain. In case there are kids watching, I'm not going to give the birds and the bees talk here. I don't think there's any kids watching, but just in case, you're not going to get that talk from me. Ask your parents. But I'm going to just, and if you are an adult, we all know how the daddy gets the baby and the mommy. I don't need to teach you that. But I explain it to her in a very sterile, sort of very clinical way. Because, I'm just trying to answer her question as she's asking it and not give her too much information. But she is asking all the right questions. So I'm like, I gotta I gotta draw this kid a diagram or something because she's asking all the right questions. So then after I do that, and I did draw a little diagram, it wasn't a crass picture or anything. It was a very clinical, very, very approved sort of thing. And I searched for it like online and everything, and like I really wanted to make sure that I answered her question adequately because I didn't want her to grow up like I did and not know anything about just reproduction or your body or sex at all. So I definitely wanted to tell her, so I did. And then she looks at me and she goes, do you like it when boys do that to you? I almost had a nervous breakdown. I literally was like gonna pass out. I was like, oh. And she's still not old enough to get a good answer to that. So I'm like, ugh. And I told her, I'm gonna have to press pause on this, but mommy will get back to you. And I will tell you, but at a later date, I gotta figure this out. And so so she side-eyed me like, yeah, right. But she let me do it. And then a couple years later, again, I don't advise doing this, but sometimes the kids get enough information and they can be pacified, and she was. But I definitely didn't leave her hanging. I did eventually explain everything to her and told her about men and their devil penis. But it was definitely rough and touch and go there for a while. So that's the teachable moments. Oh, don't talk with your mouth full, but I think every parent says that because I personally can't stand mouth noises. I can't stand chewing noises. I don't know how people watch those ASMR videos where people are chewing or the mukbangs that people do online. Like, I so want to watch those, but at the same time, I'm like, yuck. It literally makes me homicidal when I hear somebody chewing. Like, I'm just like, shut your mouth. I don't know why it is. God only knows. And obviously, I've never actually committed homicide over that. So please don't be like critical. But I'm saying is, it's annoying to me. So I'm like, of course I'm on with that. I agree with that totally. I won't chew with my mouth. I won't talk with my mouth full. I won't chew with my mouth full. I won't talk with my mouth full. And I tell my kids all the time, chew with your mouth closed. Don't talk with your mouth full. Those are like #1 rules in my world. Oh, when I was younger, have you ever, I don't know if anybody else experienced this, but have you ever had a parent like yell your name? They like call you and you're like in the other room or you're downstairs or whatever the case may be, whatever your house setup is, you're far away and they call you and instead of, and you yell back, what? I used to get in some serious trouble if I yelled back what when my name was called. When my name was called, I was supposed to present myself and say yes, very prim and proper. And if I ever did it any other way, I was in deep. I was in so much trouble. Like, no, I was grounded. Something happened, and it traveled. Even in group homes, it was like that. In my biological home, it was like that. I was never allowed to answer with what. If I heard my name called, I needed to get up and present myself. So that's what I used to do. That ever happened to you? I did pass that on to my kids just because they would yell what and they wouldn't be very far away. And I'm like, well, obviously, I don't want to yell it across the house to you what I need, or I wouldn't have yelled for you. But then I always thought that's kind of counterproductive. First, I don't yell. So it's never really been like a yell, but it was always counterproductive because I'm like, well, if I yell, I can't expect them not to yell back at me, right? Because I'm yelling. So I stopped doing it. Like I phased it out, but there was that. But it was already ingrained in them to like if they hear their name called, they just come. Oh, have you ever heard the one where you say hey to whatever? Maybe because I didn't have parents or actual parents, but I had group home staff. I got to hear certain things that I probably wouldn't have heard if I wasn't things if I was with my biological parents. But because I wasn't, the staff could be a little fast and loose. So they would be like, hey, it's for horses, I'll feed you later. And I'd be like, that is brutal. But okay. I never said that to my kids because they never really said hey a whole lot. I don't know why I was always saying hey, or maybe I was just getting heard saying hey, like somebody would overhear my hey, but I was never talking to an adult when I said it. I used to get told, and this is the last one. I'm trying not to make these videos super long because I hate editing long videos. As much as I love them, editing long videos is crap. It takes forever. And as you have seen, I'm not the best at editing, so I don't want to do that. Anyway, so there was this thing that I got told all the time that if you make a funny face, your face will get stuck like that. How many of you heard that one? Anyway, I can flip my eyelids inside out. And I used to get told that if somebody pat me on the back, my eyelids would stay like that. And I was scared to death of that happening. I was like, no, I don't want that to happen, but I couldn't help myself. I would do it all the time. I would flip my eyelids inside out and then I would look around to make sure nobody was around me so that they didn't hurt me. And now I look back at it and it's stupid. But then I was like, this makes all the sense in the world that my face would get stuck like that. Let's see if I can still do it. Like as a bonus, I'll flip my eyelid inside out. So anyway, I can really do it. And now I'm not worried that it's going to stay like that. Anyway, Peaches, what have you heard from your parents a lot that you either thought was funny or things that they used to tell you? What are some catchphrases, sayings, whatever? Or what do you use with your kids that you found yourself passing on through time, or new things that you just decided work for you and you say to your kids? Like, what's the one? I will mention one other thing. There's one thing that I used to always tell my kids, and people have judged me and said some things about it, but I don't think it's very bad because it's to instill, because I've been a single mom and you worry about your kids all the time as a single parent, you worry about your kids. And so one of the ways that I tried to hopefully build trust with my kids was I would always tell them that our relationship doesn't work unless we are honest with each other. So you tell me everything and I'll tell you as much as I can tell you, as safe as a mommy to tell you, but I'll always be honest with you. So be honest with me, I'll be honest with you. I don't care if you go outside this door and tell everybody you meet a lie, a different lie, you make it up, whatever, but when you get to me, you tell me the truth. Now, in hindsight, that might sound like I'm instructing them to lie to people, but it wasn't. It was because I had to have such a close bond with my kids to make sure that, God forbid things didn't happen. Being only one person, you don't always have, your eyes everywhere. You don't have eyes in the back of your head, contrary to popular belief. And Even though that's another one that parents would say is they have eyes in the back of their head. One other thing my mom would always say to me whenever I would catch her sleeping, and I would say, "Are you sleeping?" She's like, "No, I'm resting my eyes." Bullshit, you're sleeping. I would get so mad because then she'd be like snoring. I was like, I don't think she's resting her eyes anymore. Anyway, so I would wanted to make sure that my home was stable and that we had a good relationship. So I was very honest with my kids, and not to say that I was overly honest. I never over informed, but I definitely practiced honesty, and I would have them practice that same honesty with me. And I would tell them, as long as you're honest with me and we can be honest with each other and you're respectful with your honesty, there's nothing you can't tell me. But I would always make sure they knew, like, I don't care what the world knows, but when you come in this door, when you see me, we have to have trust here, because I can't be everywhere and I need to trust what you say. So it was never instructing them to ever lie to anyone, but it was definitely letting them know that this needed to be a safe space for them. So let me know if you have anything that you say to your kids or your parents ever said, or things that you think you'll never use with your kids that your parents used with you, or things that you think you want to use with your kids if you don't have any. Like, share, subscribe, comment, messenger pigeon, smoke signal, whatever, telegram. Do whatever, but share this with people. You definitely like this video, definitely subscribe, and I will be putting up videos as fast as I can. I'm turning them out, and I'm trying to get better at this, but it's going to be a little rough patch, but please bear with me because things will get better. Anyway, like, subscribe, comment, press the notification thing so that you get notifications when a new upload is done, and I shall see you later, peaches. I better check Instagram since it's clearly blowing up and making this video crappy.
Are you listening?